to the border basically on the back of Ops Protea. I mean, Ops Protea had been done in August of 1981. We were in the unit, we heard about that. Gulf Company, who was our sister company, some of them had gone up to be backup for that. So we were prepped, as it were, from quite an incredible bunch of seniors that had gone through, Ops Protea, which was possibly one of the biggest ops successes that we've had.
We were dispatched or sent off to relieve 2 and 3 para that had held the airport at Wengeba. And that was a sight. I mean, to go into Angola, you've seen the aftermath of Ops Protea and the previous battles that they've had. The town looks shot to hell. We all fresh and clean shaven and looking good, and we arrive and we see 2 and 3 para, and they look like they've been through hell.
In about June of 1982, Operation Meebos started really happening, where we started looking at smaller bases, hitting bases, walking in on bases, all supposedly smaller. We had a lot of lemons, nothing there by the time we got, but the area ops grew, and we had a lot of issues with 3-2 Battalion.
We were in an area, and there's certain lines, when you go over certain lines, at one line you need a platoon, you cross over another line, you need 2 platoons, you cross over another line, you need a battalion. That's kind of how I believe it worked. And there were 3-2 working in the area, and we were being withdrawn because of a previous conflict that there was between own forces, and we were told to be lifted out, okay? And I remember we were sitting there, it was Shane Yates, myself, and I think de Klerk with a light machine gun. The guys are starting to clean rifle, and I'm looking at this, and I'm seeing a movement in the grass, and I'm picking up my rifle. I'm seeing a white face, and I put my rifle down, and I said, "Don't shoot its own forces." And the next minute, fire. I mean, real contact, and these guys are hitting us, and I'm screaming, "Don't shoot its own forces." And we reach for a yellow smoke and throw the yellow smoke to Starkvuur, and almost skree, "Starkvuur, Starkvuur, Starkvuur." And from the headquarters position, where they're now in the center, we're kind of on the outskirts here, there's bombs going off from mortars. The next minute the bombs are falling.
And we, very unfortunately, killed a couple of our 3-2 brothers. There's lots of stories about that, but at the end of the day, it was quite tragic. By the time we got back in, we'd been joined by 3-2, and the base that we got to had been evacuated. And from there, we then waited for further instructions from Captain Ratta and the 3-2 recce's to the next base. And the next base happened to be a base pretty far north, very, very close to Cassinga. And he asked for an additional 24 hours to confirm the base and other movements that they had picked up.
He flew out a company of 32 Battalion to sweep in a direction to try and attempt to pinpoint the base position. Having had a number of lemons under the belt, so to speak, up to that specific point, panicked. Did not want to take the reconnaissance perspective to heart.
Actually said we can't wait any longer, and he sent us in 8 choppers. And it was in that mid-afternoon attack that we were flying into to this big base, suspected big base, that we flew over another massive base, unbeknown to Captain Ratta, even though he suspected something there, and hence the reason he asked for 24 hours. And it was over that base that the 3rd and 4th waves of choppers, so we flew in 4 waves, the 3rd and the 4th wave came under fire. The 3rd wave, both choppers were hit. One, as we know, exploded. I was in the 4th wave in Falk 4. Immediately the choppers circled, the Alouettes that were with us, the gunships, went to height to plot, and we returned to the helicopter admin area, which wasn't too far away. And it was at that stage that we realized that the chopper had gone down, and that we had lost 15 South Africans, 3 Air Force and 12 paratroopers.
And it's like chaos, you know. Choppers are down, and it's like, who was there? Who was there? Quickly do a roll call on sticks, and you know, check your buddies. And there, Andries van Niekerk, ek in sy moer, you know, he's dead. I mean, this is a youngster that was in the mortar accident with E Company, who was playing with mortars. I was taking, for the next 6 months, I was taking shrapnel out of his hands, you know, every other week, operate on the guy with a scalpel, take another piece of metal out of his body. And this guy is now gone. You know, I mean, this is the guy that was with me since Middelburg. Now,
James Marshall,
you know, yeah.
my good friends, those guys.
Those are good guys. They're good guys, you know.
It was a terrible day. We had the Pumas flying over our Liga area in a westerly direction across along the dry river bed, which was called the Muir River, and Willem Ratte had located some insurgents just to the north of the river, and they were involved in a running skirmish, in a contact. And during the second run of the Pumas over the same spot on this river, they flew over a SWAPO detachment with anti-aircraft guns, and one of the choppers was shot down. If I can remember correctly, the commander of the chopper was Captain Twaddle. And the Puma went down burning, and 15 of our soldiers were killed, 12 paratroopers and 3 of the airmen. I scrambled with 6-1 Mech to this position to support them, whilst a contact was just happening to the north of that position. And when I arrived at the site where the Puma was downed, I deployed in an all-round position and told my guys to remain on their vehicles. And then I drove forward to the position where the Puma was still burning. I could see the bodies inside the Puma, and they were alight. I started counting the bodies with my air support officer, Major Jaap de Preet, to make dead sure that nobody was captured by SWAPO, because the 3 pilots were positioned in their seats, and we could see that photos were taken of them. And a few hours later, the insurgents that were involved in that incident were shot just higher up, a few kilometers from us, and some of our soldiers' dog tags were found on the bodies of the insurgents, as well as Polaroid photographs that they were taken. But there were two incidents that really touched my soul. The one was that one of my lieutenants from Charlie Squadron, a Lieutenant Weideman, drove closer with his Ratel 90, and for some or other reason he dismounted and he walked towards me, and the helicopter door was lying just in front of me, and it was surrounded by shell casings and SWAPO tracks. And I said to him, stop, don't move one step further. And at that moment he stepped onto a personnel mine, and the bottom part of his body was blown to bits. And luckily he was alive, and we could evacuate him very quickly to one military hospital in Pretoria. But the another part of the story was that one of the paratroopers, one of the soldiers, fell out of the helicopter because we could follow his track, and there was marks which we could follow along for approximately 30 yards, and there we found him lying against a tree. He was burned to pieces. The flesh was just hanging from him, and he had a shot through his head, where I believe that SWAPO really gave him a coup de grace, and he was killed on the spot. But all these soldiers were killed, I believe, immediately when the helicopter went down.
Colonel LaRue, who had just taken over from Colonel Hills as ops commander, thought it wise not to let us go in because we were too emotional and wouldn't look after our own safety. And our officer commanding, Major Jab Swart, on a very rare occasion of support to A Company, actually said that he demanded that we go back. It was our right to go back and attack the same people who had shot our brothers down. And the next morning, the Air Force, and I think the entire Air Force was dispatched into the air. I mean, there were Mirages. They even had Canberras in the air for us. They found where the majority of them had gone to. It was a dry riverbed. They bombed the living bejeevers out of them. And they fled towards us. And we were then put in a stopper group and went through and were very, very successful in eradicating large numbers of enemy through that. Just before Operation Meebos started in earnest, where a whole lot of us, or Grant Krill, one of those that was killed in the chopper, myself and a couple were sitting next to a river, having a little bit of R&R, somewhere up near Cuvelai. And I remember the conversation quite clearly because it hit me years later, the arrogance of youth. And of course, after the chopper was shot down, I mean, I think we all were given the biggest dose of reality that reality can give you. The loss of literally a whole stick of your mates. And I think it's taken out most of the guys, I think, years to get over that, if at all. But going home, we weren't allowed to go home at first because they had an issue with us going home. We had to stay in the base for a week, let our parents and friends know, that those of us that were alive, that we were alive. And we had to, of course, bury our dead. And a week after we got back, we had a massive parade at Wanban where we actually buried the ashes of the 12 on the parade ground, or some of the ashes on the parade ground, where A Company itself was the only one on parade, and the rest were all on the grandstands around the parade. And then going home, I don't think the guys had sunk in properly yet.